And with us now, former Victorian Sex and Reason MP Fiona Patten, now running in the Senate in Victoria for the Legalise Cannabis Party. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Leo.
So, with Reason, it has been interesting, right? Because the party is officially gone at this point. And I know you yourself maintained ties with Legalise Cannabis, and they've got their two MPs now. One of them is a former Reason candidate, so there's always been a bit of crossover there. I guess from what you've done in Victoria with the party's work, just quickly on this, why was the decision made to really just disband it all together and not enter into like a merger with Legalise Cannabis or anything like that?
Um, it was probably mainly just a logistical issue, Leo. I think the party had been going from its first iteration of Sex Party to Reason. It had been running for nearly 15 years, and the sort of the volunteers to manage that party, to have managed a merger, just weren't really there. And I think people had become a little bit tired, and many of them have probably moved over to legalise cannabis as well as other parties. So it seemed like the cleanest move to make was to formally close the party, close the associated associations.
Yeah, and of course, you are one of those people who did move over. Whenabouts did you, I guess, make that formal move over to join Legalise Cannabis? And then also, how long has this Senate run been in the works?
Yeah. Look, it took quite a bit of arm twisting, I'd have to say, Leo. I had a great time in Parliament for those 8 years, and I honestly loved almost every minute of it. But I wasn't looking to go back into campaigning and back into a parliamentary role. And I spent a good bit of time last year mentoring the Legalise Cannabis MPs, because as new MPs, with a fairly powerful position on the crossbench, it was great to be able to share my experiences with them in getting them up and running and up to speed. But really joining the party and uh, putting my hand up to run for the Senate has only really been in the last 2.5 months. And I think that's also because the party's only been turning their head to a federal campaign and candidates over the last 2.5 months. But as I say, I've got a lot of friends in the Legalised Cannabis Party, and there was really a little bit of unfinished business there for me personally around cannabis.
Yeah, now look, you had experience in the upper house, so I think you know enough about quotas and preferences and things like that. With the Senate here, I think off the top of my head, 3% of the vote legalized cannabis got in Victoria last election, which is not that far off where you need to be considering where Ralph Babet got in for the UAP. Realistically speaking, are you actually optimistic that you are able to get in? Because it would be, your party's first ever federal representative, and it would be quite an extraordinary step, especially considering that sixth seat, I guess, has kind of gone to what you'd say notionally the right? You've had it held by the coalition and now the UAP on different election cycles.
You're absolutely right, Leo. And that last six seat, it certainly is up for grabs, and it will depend. It really will depend on the way the preferences move on the night of the election as to what we'll see. It will depend on whether legalized cannabis is on how to vote cards for different parties. I mean, it will also depend on whether One Nation's on how to vote cards. So there's lots of variables in that, but I do think that we have got a chance. And again, legalized cannabis, a little bit like the sex party, it attracts a broad range of people. It also, and to be quite honest, it also attracts a kind of disengaged and disaffected voter that goes, I'm just going to vote for the leaf on the ballot. So, you're not necessarily, I don't think the Legalised Cannabis Party would be considered from the left. We're certainly not aligned with the socialists or the Greens. We'd be, as I always have been politically, really aligned in the centre. But Yeah, the battle will be, I think, against those parties from the right. So One Nation, UAP, they might decide to throw a few $1 million into Victoria again, and possibly the Libertarians.
And just on the central issue, as you can imagine, from the party
Yeah,
legalizing
yeah,
cannabis, I
yeah.
think that there's a slogan, and I'm not exactly getting off the top of my head, but that I know the Legalise Cannabis Party in Queensland has been using, which is something like one topic, many issues, or something like that. And I guess trying to move away from being considered entirely single issue. Really, what is the platform in terms of specifics? Because you can all just say legalize cannabis, and of course there are several parties that advocate for it, including
Oh,
obviously yourself, the
sure.
Greens, the Libertarian Party. What is,
Right.
I guess, the specific element of the Legalise Cannabis Party's legalizing cannabis platform that makes you stand out and really should get you votes on this issue?
Look, legalized cannabis, as it says on the tin, is around regulating cannabis. And I think the approach that the party takes to that is quite different from other parties. So while libertarians would have a very deregulated model, we've seen the Greens bill on this, and it's an extraordinary regulated model that overrides the rights of the states and the rights of local governments in making decisions. Fundamentally, legalized cannabis is about choice. And not dissimilar to the sex party. It was about a freedom of choice, and it was about, again, that kind of addressing that nanny state. And I know that as I say that, well, the libertarians would say the same thing, but I think legalized cannabis does it, will do it in a different way and look at regulation, not deregulation, as we'd see with some of the other parties.
And just on legalized cannabis, I think one criticism that I see leveled against the party, and maybe it's just on social media, but I do see it, is that the party at some level with its state MPs, and I know you've got four at the moment, is a bit disjointed. Pardon the pun, bit disjointed at the moment. Didn't even mean to do that. So really, is that, I guess, something that you have to address, or is a concern, given, I guess, that there have been some controversies with like your MPs in
Look, I know what you're
WA?
saying, Leo, and it's something that I'm really familiar with. Having founded the Sex Party, I'm really familiar with a fast-growing party that has those growing pains. Now, the Sex Party never achieved the success that legalized cannabis has. I mean, legalized cannabis has elected 5 state MPs in its very short life. Um, uh, Touching on your points around WA. Certainly, they're now down to one MP in WA. One of the MPs has resigned due to various differences with the party, and I think with members in the party. But yeah, there is growing pains, and there's a small, fast-growing party. I think it's the fourth largest party in Australia now. And it's only been around really for 2 or 3 years in its current form. So I'm not worried about that. I see really experienced MPs like Jeremy Buckingham in New South Wales, um, being able to speak on a whole range of issues. Again, he holds balance of power. So as a crossbencher in those upper houses, he needs to make decisions on a whole range of issues, as I used to when I was in Parliament. Rachel Payne and David Edershank in Victoria also seem to be able to challenge the government in certain areas, but also uh, vote with confidence on a range of issues. And whether, yes, the Legalised Cannabis Party would be unapologetically um, uh, you know uh, for addressing climate change, for example. But the and that sort of works within their general policies. But yeah, it's a fast growing party. It's got the membership's going through the roof, and yeah, that does create strain, that's for sure.
And just quickly on that, and I know that you've had, 8 years of experience in the
Mm,
Victorian Upper House on a wide range of
yeah.
issues, and you had, the Reason platform and the Sex platform before that. But, there will be plenty of voters who might be considering legalized cannabis in Victoria who don't know you or don't necessarily know your platform. And just
Yeah,
on that about a Senate crossbench role, right? You would have to be going on a bunch of issues that you'd have to address,
yeah,
including, not just state issues, right? Huge international issues, major things that get huge national attention,
yeah.
with respect, probably bigger than you would have ever had it at the state level,
Right.
right?
That's
Um,
right.
how are you going to, I guess, assure that those potential voters know that you're a reliable voice, that is someone who
Yeah.
does know these issues, can talk about them, even if your party's platform is on that cannabis issue and your party's name is on
Yeah.
cannabis?
I I do hope that I will get the opportunity to assure voters in the lead up to the election that I have always voted with integrity. I've also always voted with evidence. So I worked very hard at the state level to get across every single piece of legislation that I was asked to vote on. I did not take any issue lightly. And and I see that will be this. I see that no different in the Senate. I understand it will be a difficult role. In Victoria, every portfolio was my portfolio. So if we had a justice bill, I needed to understand it. If we had an energy bill, I needed to understand it. And the same will go for the Senate. And I agree with you. But if I was successful in the Senate, you're right. I will be needing to put that same rigor towards defence bills, that same rigor towards international relations and the types of national legislation that we will be facing. And I feel confident that I can use the experiences of getting across legislation in Victoria to help me in at a federal level.
Look, it's going to be absolutely fascinating to see how this plays out. I'm sure we'll catch up again in the months ahead. Fiona Patten, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Leo.